I have been married for over 40 years. Over the years, I have been very successful in both my career and my life. My family always had everything they needed, and my wife Nicole never lacked for anything. However, as time went on, I began to notice strange things. It turned out that Nicole was cheating on me. The circumstances that soon followed came as a shock to me. I'll tell you the story, starting with the events that happened exactly 1 year ago one Monday. It was then that I felt something strange. Nicole, like me, was retired. She was a school teacher and I was a transportation police officer. Even though our passion wasn't as vibrant as it had been when we were younger, we still loved each other. However, by that Monday, I had forgotten when our last intimate moment had been. Nicole attributed my apparent boredom and subsequent lethargy to my lack of hobbies, but I saw another reason for it. I suspected she might have had someone else. By posing this puzzling question to her, I wanted to understand why she didn't feel the longing like I did. That same day, she mentioned meeting Sylvia, an old school friend. They agreed to meet for a cup of coffee in town. Skeptical, I decided to follow her. Watched their meeting at my favorite cafe. Everything seemed normal. When she returned with her purchases, each receipt was meticulously organized. Date, time, price. As a former police officer, I was used to paying attention to detail. For 3 weeks, she went to pottery class every Thursday and I frequented the pub. I watched her regular routine from a neighboring pub. Through the window, I could see her practicing her pottery. Despite the obvious evidence, the doubts never left me. The following Wednesday, the day we usually did laundry, a revelation occurred. Nicole was in the habit of changing towels every week, alternating between blue and purple sets. This time, she handed me the blue towels and asked me to get the purple ones out of the closet. Then it came to my attention that the towels were all part of a systematic replacement. As we were sorting out the bed, my attention was drawn to an unusual white towel that was not part of our usual bathroom set. This white towel was not necessary for our normal routine. It hinted at a possible secret affair, perhaps right in our home. To avoid suspicion, I thought Nicole might have used those towels to hide the evidence without leaving a mark on the bedding. This disturbing thought began to haunt me. The cold March weather contrasted with the presence of these white towels that should have been hidden months ago. Could it be that she had indeed betrayed our vows within the confines of our home? This revelation proved to be crushing, shattering any remaining illusions. I had been enjoying a peaceful sleep in our bed lately, yet it seemed almost unbelievable that I wouldn't have noticed if she was engaged in intimate affairs with someone near me. Suddenly, this realization hit me like a falling anvil. It became clear that my lack of energy wasn't just due to depression. There was something else at play. She interrupted my thoughts by saying, "You look lost, dear." I replied, "Oh, just solving a mental puzzle that's been bothering me." It was all beginning to make sense. Now, she nonchalantly advised me to keep my mind active before returning to her book and finishing my coffee. I decided to keep my thoughts to myself. Assuring her that my mind was indeed active, I reconstructed in my mind a possible scenario. She was the suspect, injecting the victim, me, with a dose of Rohypnol and then inviting an unknown lover into the house. It all started to seem so obvious. About 3 months ago, our evening routine changed. She would bring me some whiskey at 8:50 p.m., and at 10:20 p.m. we would take pills, a mild sedative for her sleep, statins for my cholesterol lowering, and multivitamins for both of us. She claimed that taking the medication just before bedtime improved sleep efficiency. The thought crossed my mind that she might have called and snuck into the house at this hour. Discarded the thought that it could have been an annoying neighbor. The cast of characters in this mystery seems to be expanding, requiring more details. I'm Fred Brown, former inspector. Before retiring 2 years ago at the age of 60, a career setback forced me to join the British Transport Police, where I have worked as a detective inspector for the past 5 years. Despite my efforts to stay fit, I was overcome by lethargy. However, if my suspicions are correct, things are about to change. I am a tall man, 5'11", value honesty, and don't like to cheat. Nicole, my wife, is about 5 feet 8 inches. She is tall, with a graceful and slender figure, small breasts, long dark hair, and green eyes. Our neighbors are the elderly couple on the right, who are rarely seen, and Kimberly and the seemingly obnoxious Billy on the left. Although Nicole insists that Billy is a wonderful person, I see him differently. Julia, who is perfect, lost her first husband to cancer, and has most recently been living with a jerk for 5 years. I have a plausible theory about the who, how, and where, but no concrete evidence. The pill situation remains a mystery, but I continue to live by my own rules. Thursday night, Nicole leaves for her pottery class at 6:00 p.m. as usual and returns around 7:30 p.m. Right after she left, I quickly grabbed a pair of needlepoint gloves from a box in the garage. I started searching my house. I wasn't sure exactly what I was looking for. Something unusual, perhaps an element that had no place in our daily lives. Often we notice inconsistencies, but with careful investigation, even the smallest oddities can suggest a solution. At first, I focused on the pills. They were presented as vitamins. I suspected they were prescribed sedatives. My suspicions were confirmed when I read the accompanying brochure. It warned of the effects of alcohol. The consumption the morning after I refused to take them confirmed my hunch. Over the next few hours, I felt rejuvenated. I combed every room thoroughly, made sure there was no trace of my research left behind. I found no obvious signs of intimacy in the guest bedrooms. The clean sheets seemed fresh, even though I knew they hadn't been washed recently. There were no signs of infidelity in our bedroom. This added to my disappointment. I did, however, find a gold wrapper from a ribbed condom. It was hidden in a chaise lounge in the back of the house. It was not a brand I had ever used. Then it dawned on me that they were having sex on the couch, using the towel to hide the evidence. She threw the towel in the wash and returned to our bed. My marriage, in my opinion, was irreparably damaged. I could initiate a divorce without proving her infidelity, but that wasn't enough. Some form of retribution was needed. Though I considered myself above pettiness, the magnitude of the disrespect demanded a response. I cherished a burning desire for revenge. I sat in silence for the next few days, planning my strategy. I noticed how indifferent my wife was to my mood. Thinking about it, I found myself disliking her just as much. However, being the sole bearer of information about our impending divorce, I continued to pretend every night. Smiling, I pretended to take pills, only to discreetly spit them out when she turned away. One night, around midnight, I was disturbed by the vibration of her phone. I pretended to be asleep when she got out of bed and slipped out of our room. The sound of the linen closet door opening and closing on the landing filled the silence. Despite my bravado, I felt a sense of unease. I considered going downstairs and catching her in the act, but hesitated. I didn't want to witness the betrayal face to face. The idea seemed tempting, but I knew it would lead to complications. Then an idea struck me. I had a spare remote control for the home alarm system taped under my nightstand. I expected her to turn the system off when she went downstairs to let her lover in. I gave them a couple minutes to get comfortable and pressed the alarm button. The chaos that ensued in the house ruined their love plans. As I watched him hurriedly leave the house, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Although Nicole had managed to disable the alarm system, I knew she had no idea how it worked except for turning it on and off. Later, I couldn't resist checking it out. Reluctantly, I asked her what had happened. She complained that she had to go downstairs to turn the alarm off. I innocently asked what had set it off. She countered that it was impossible if there was no one downstairs. I offered to go and have a look. A firm no came from her. She knew that trying to go downstairs in my current condition could result in an ambulance call or worse. She was smart enough to realize the possible complications. Eventually, she told me that she had already set the alarm, checked all the doors and windows, and told me to go to bed. I complied and enjoyed a quiet weekend. Throughout the weekend, Nicole managed to keep her composure. However, during her shower, I spent anxious moments reading text messages on her phone. I set the lock screen to her backup password, anticipating that their complacency would lead to another scheduled date on Tuesday. By Sunday evening, they had recovered from Saturday night. They agreed to meet on Tuesday at 11:30. This fit perfectly into my plan. First, I needed to talk to Kimberly on Monday. I was hoping she would be working from home. Luckily, she was on site. "Hello, Fred," she greeted me with a sweet smile as she opened the door. The smile disappeared when she saw my serious and concerned expression. "Is something wrong? You look so serious," she asked. "I'm sorry, but we need to talk, and we don't have much time," I replied. She agreed to meet outside the library at 2:30. I began to summarize the situation to her. Kimberly was shocked and expressed her disappointment with Billy's actions. "How angry are you?" I asked cautiously, adding not to hurt them unduly. Kimberly agreed and expressed her desire to hurt them, but not too much. I suggested a plan and she approved. She liked the idea of being victims and letting the police deal with their crimes. When we parted ways, I warned her that the police might ask about our last conversation, and we decided that we would talk about the spare printer cable. In the days that followed, I spent time alone with Kimberly, slowly beginning to appreciate her beauty, intelligence, and vengeful spirit. I shared with her my simple and easy-to-implement plan. She agreed to mull it over. On Tuesday, while I was cleaning out my garage, I noticed signs that Nicole was preparing for another date at our house. I refrained from talking to Kimberly, making sure everything seemed normal that evening. Nicole brought me a large glass of whiskey and some pills. I pretended to swallow them so my talk screen would be accurate. I passed out from exhaustion and went to bed, preparing myself for the events that would unfold on Tuesday. I dozed off, pondering why she thought it was acceptable to treat me this way after nearly 4 decades of marriage and 2 children. Not only did she betray me, but she did it under our own roof. She drugged me with sedatives. After about 15 minutes, I felt heartless. I noticed her getting into bed and decided that Fane was lifeless after she checked on me. She went to the bathroom and I heard the shower running. She started brushing her teeth. When I heard the toilet flush, I took the sedative I had saved earlier and continued to pretend to be lifeless. At 11:30, her phone vibrated on the bedside table. I snorted quietly as if alarmed, then froze again and slowed my breathing. She walked out of the room to answer the call, leaving her phone behind. I couldn't help but smile when her phone rang again. I was confused. Not long after my phone rang, it was Kimberly. I didn't answer, saying I was awake. I went downstairs without alerting them, stopping by the partially open kitchen door. I heard them doing intimate things. It filled me with disgust and hatred. I wondered what I had done to deserve such treatment. If she didn't love me, she could leave. But why involve an arrogant person I'd seen well enough? I grabbed a rolling pin off the kitchen countertop to avoid suspicion. I stood and listened until she unknowingly did me a favor by yelling at me to keep it up. I burst into the room and yelled at him to get away from my wife. I calmed her down and collapsed on top of them, pretending to pass out. The drugs worked as expected and my pretend became reality. Kimberly, however, continued her story for about 10 seconds. Billy brought her a drink and a pill of vitamins, as usual, exactly like my wife's. After taking them, she had a coughing fit in the bathroom. She threw up in the sink without alerting her husband. He later disappeared and she heard the door close. When he didn't return, she called him, but there was no answer. Confused, she looked out the bedroom window and saw him at the patio door that leads to the sunroom. Concerned, she texted Nicole and called me, but was ignored. Alarmed, she went outside and witnessed her husband's betrayal. She filmed the encounter until I intervened. I may have been drunk and mistakenly thought my wife was being attacked. I honestly don't remember what I did at the time because I was really out of it. I hit Billy in the head, and that's when Kimberly stopped filming. She called emergency services and gently reported the situation. At the hospital, the doctor and uniformed police officers explained that I might have been intoxicated. They demanded a blood test. I was dizzy and feeling tired, but I knew something had to be done. Worry for my wife dominated my thoughts. The doctor assured me that she had spoken to the police. I passed out again. The next time I woke up, I was at the hospital and they were ready to take my blood for analysis. I nodded in agreement, vaguely telling the doctor, "Do what you need to do, I have nothing to hide," as he took a sample. The next morning, I reclined on the bed and fell asleep. I woke up around 9:00 a.m. and found another uniformed officer at the door, a young man in his early 20s. He politely asked, "Are you all right, sir?" "I think so," I replied, but I had no idea why I was here. "I'll let the boss explain. It's beyond me," I added. A nurse came in shortly after, offering me tea and toast while checking my vital signs while the officer spoke quietly into his radio. Updating the information, the nurse left, promising to bring a late breakfast. The officer approached and stated that the boss would be arriving soon on another case. "Ready to wait, sir?" he asked. I replied with a smile. "Paradise." Recognizing the implications of leaving, he smirked at my answer, appreciating the professionalism. Later, as we chatted over breakfast and beer, discussing England's poor performance in Australia, he mentioned that the boss would soon be arriving in the interrogation room at the police station. I found myself arrested on suspicion of assault and actual bodily harm. The investigator, after introducing himself, reiterated the severity of the charge and made sure I was aware of the possible consequences, then asked me to recount the events of the previous night. I explained mostly the facts. Tired, I went to bed after my wife brought me a drink and some pills. Suddenly waking up, I found that my wife was missing and I heard a noise downstairs. Acting on impulse, I intervened, only later learning that the man I had attacked was my neighbor, Mr. Billy Miller. The investigator informed me that my wife had also been arrested for pinning the man to the ground as the paramedics drove us away, expressing a sincere insult. I questioned the investigator about Billy's identity. He revealed that Billy was my wife's lover and they had conspired to drug us both for the past 3 months. They had a prescription drug mislabeled as vitamins causing potential harm. The investigation progressed and revealed cooperation between Billy and my wife in keeping us intoxicated, continuing their case. The police found evidence of their malice, charging them with poisoning and conspiracy to commit fraud. Both received serious prison sentences. When Ed Billy was discharged from the hospital, it marked the end of the tumultuous legal proceedings. He was sent to the police station and then both of us went to trial. My wife received 2 years in prison for abuse of office and another 2 years for conspiracy and committing fraud. Interestingly, both sentences would run concurrently. For Ed, he received a 3-year sentence for malicious use, given Kimberly's lifelong liver damage, and another 5 years for fraud. Kimberly did her best to help the police, diligently tracking every penny. Ed, surprisingly, had a bright side. Prison doctors expressed confidence that his speech would return to normal upon release. However, his future employment prospects could only be speculated about, given that the police had confiscated most of his assets under the Proceeds of Crime Act. Even his old school friends were hesitant to offer him a finance-related job. It's not over yet. The police recognized that we were victims, and I wasn't charged with assault because I was drugged by the partner of the man I was accused of assaulting. I brought in old acquaintances from the national press. Kimberly and I kept a dignified silence, feeling terribly betrayed by those we trusted. We needed a place to contemplate as the news spread with a joyous frenzy. Kimberly and Billy faced relentless slander from all sides. No commentator found excuses for his behavior. Kimberly especially elicited sympathy with her charm, leaving everyone wondering why Billy would leave her for someone else. Our 2 children were present in court throughout the trial. I couldn't sit with them until I testified and was released as a witness. The court hearing lasted only 20 minutes. During that time, forensic experts presented incriminating testimony. They included blood tests, a description of Kimberly's liver damage, pictures of vitamin containers, text messages, and financial audit results. The disclosures in their text messages pretty much admitted everything. Despite his initial belief that he was right, the truth came out at trial. My daughter severed her relationship with her mother. She wrote a letter to her in prison forbidding any contact because her mother had been convicted of poisoning. My son, deeply shaken, asked if I objected to him visiting her in prison to hear her point of view. I advised him to be prepared to be disappointed and went to that meeting. A few weeks later, he called me confirming his disappointment. Nicole blamed her actions on the influence of a man who seduced her when she was vulnerable. She had engaged in an affair with this man, who turned out to be a treasurer. I divorced her during the investigation, sold the house, and equitably distributed the damages to our estate. She had to pay an attorney for her defense, and I filed a personal injury lawsuit against her for emotional trauma caused by her malicious actions. By the time she is released, she will have a pension and nothing more. Kimberly divorced Billy, who had hoped to receive half of their home, but soon realized that the house had been placed in trust for their twins from Kimberly's first marriage. She retained the right to occupy the house while Billy faced an uncertain future. Kimberly and I endured public scrutiny, portraying ourselves as the hapless victims of 2 equally despicable spouses. When the media pressure became overwhelming, I took a break, retreating to a villa in the south of France. Kimberly also visited a friend in a similar villa. A trust developed between us that grew from friendship to love. I eventually moved in with Kimberly, and we became life partners. Our children and grandchildren have formed a close bond. Kimberly and I, we value our relationship. This story began with my frustration over the lack of intimacy. Kimberly offered to make up for the damage her husband had done by taking a debt from me. I was paid back in full within the first week of our stay in France. Kimberly proved to be a passionate partner. I marveled at how that idiot could leave her for an ordinary woman like Nicole. We now take the right vitamins every night. Kimberly also stopped drinking to promote healing of her liver. I also stopped wanting to live without her around for as long as possible. Earlier, I mentioned Kimberly's beauty, intelligence, and vindictiveness, half-jokingly. Now it's the absolute truth. She has lost her husband to cancer, raised 2 children alone, and faced betrayal. But she is able to love with all her heart, accepting all my flaws. That's the end of the story.